every person believes they know who they are. We describe ourselves with simple labels: confident or shy, successful or struggling, lucky or unlucky. Over time, these labels begin to feel like permanent truths. But what if many of those beliefs were never actually chosen by you? What if the limits you accept today were quietly formed years ago through experiences you were too young to question? Psychology suggests that much of what we call identity is simply a story our brain has repeated for so long that it now feels like reality. And the most important question is this: if that story was learned, is it possible to rewrite it? Because sometimes the biggest thing holding us back is not the world around us. It's the identity we never realized we were carrying. There is a version of you that never truly began, not because opportunity was missing, and not because ability was absent. It stopped before it even started because somewhere along the way, a quiet conclusion was accepted. A belief formed so subtly that you never noticed when it happened. The belief simply said, "This is not meant for someone like me." Most people live their entire lives without ever questioning that belief. They call it personality. They call it reality. They describe it as just the way things are. But decades of psychological research suggest something far more uncomfortable. Many of the beliefs shaping our lives were never consciously chosen. They were absorbed long before we were capable of evaluating them. The human mind has a powerful tendency toward what psychologists call cognitive consistency. This means the brain constantly tries to make reality match what it already believes about you. The brain is not designed primarily for growth. Its main function is efficiency and survival. It prefers familiar patterns because familiarity requires less energy. When the brain forms a conclusion about who you are, it begins working quietly in the background to reinforce that conclusion. If somewhere in your past the brain concluded that you are someone who struggles, someone who almost succeeds but never quite crosses the line, or someone meant for a limited version of life, it will repeatedly look for evidence to support that idea. It does not do this out of cruelty. It does it out of loyalty to consistency. The mind protects the story it already knows, even when that story is outdated. The unsettling truth is that identity often feels like truth. When a belief has been repeated enough times across years of experience, it becomes difficult to recognize it as a belief at all. It simply feels like reality. What many people do not realize is that identity is not something we are born with. Identity is something we learn. During the earliest years of life, especially between birth and the age of 7, the brain functions in a state that closely resembles deep hypnosis. In this stage, the brain absorbs information without questioning it. Children accept statements, behaviors, and emotional patterns as facts about the world. The environment a child grows up in becomes the blueprint for what they later believe is normal. Words spoken repeatedly by parents, teachers, or authority figures often become internal beliefs. Emotional reactions observed at home become emotional patterns the brain learns to replicate. Without realizing it, the child begins building a model of how life works and where they belong within it. A child who repeatedly hears that money is difficult to earn often grows into an adult who works hard, yet never feels financially secure. A child who observes adults giving up when challenges arise may subconsciously interpret discomfort as a signal to stop. A child praised only for natural intelligence rather than effort may grow into someone who avoids difficult challenges because struggle begins to feel like proof of inadequacy. None of these patterns are chosen consciously. They are installed gradually through repetition and observation. At the time, the child does not have the ability to evaluate them. The brain simply records what it experiences and stores it as truth. As adults, however, we begin to see the consequences of these early programs. We notice patterns repeating in relationships, in career choices, and in the way we respond to pressure. Often, we interpret these patterns as personality traits, when in reality, they are learned responses. People frequently hear the phrase, "Step outside your comfort zone." The phrase has become so common that it almost sounds meaningless. But psychologically, the comfort zone has a very specific definition. It is not necessarily a place where we feel happy or fulfilled. It is simply the space that matches what our identity already expects. The comfort zone is the territory where our beliefs about ourselves remain unchallenged. Even when that territory includes dissatisfaction or frustration, the brain still prefers it because it is familiar. This explains why people sometimes remain in relationships that no longer bring them joy. It explains why individuals stay in careers that slowly drain their energy. The issue is rarely a lack of opportunity. More often, the problem is that a person's internal identity has quietly determined what level of life feels normal. Psychological studies have shown that when external circumstances change dramatically, internal identity still tends to pull people back toward their previous patterns. For example, many lottery winners eventually return to their previous financial conditions within a few years. Despite the sudden increase in wealth, their financial behaviors remain influenced by the identity they developed earlier in life. Identity, more often than not, overrides circumstance. What appears from the outside as self-sabotage is often the mind trying to maintain familiarity. People sometimes work intensely toward a goal for months or years, only to make a critical mistake when success finally becomes visible. They miss an important opportunity, create unnecessary conflict, or hesitate at the moment action is required. From an external perspective, it can look like poor judgment or bad luck. Internally, it may feel confusing and frustrating. But psychologically, it often represents something deeper. The mind is trying to return to the level of success that feels normal, Psychologist Gay Hendricks described this pattern as the upper limit problem. According to his research, individuals often carry an internal threshold for happiness, success, and love. When life begins to exceed that threshold, subtle behaviors emerge that bring things back down to familiar territory. This is why willpower alone rarely produces lasting change. Discipline can force new behavior temporarily, but when pressure increases, the deeper identity underneath tends to reassert itself. Real transformation begins only when identity itself begins to shift. Fortunately, identity is not permanently fixed. Modern neuroscience has demonstrated that the brain possesses remarkable adaptability, a property known as neuroplasticity. Neural pathways change in response to repeated experiences and behaviors. However, identity does not change through motivation alone. Motivation provides temporary energy, but it fades quickly when daily routines return. Identity also does not change simply through new information. Most people already know far more than they consistently apply in their lives. Identity changes through evidence. When a person repeatedly behaves in alignment with a new direction, the brain gradually updates its internal model of who that person is becoming. The change rarely happens suddenly. It occurs through small, consistent actions performed over ordinary days. A writer does not wait until they feel like a writer before writing. They write regularly, and the identity of writer slowly forms around the habit. A person developing discipline does not wait until discipline feels natural. They practice it imperfectly, often on days when motivation is absent. Over time, the behavior becomes familiar, and familiarity eventually becomes identity. The sequence is simple, but often uncomfortable. Action comes first. Identity follows. There is another truth that psychology consistently reveals across cultures and generations. The greatest regret in life rarely belongs to those who attempted something and failed. Instead, it belongs to those who never truly attempted what they believed they were capable of. Years pass whether we act deliberately or not. Life moves forward with quiet consistency. Eventually, many people look back and realize that they were waiting for perfect conditions, waiting for confidence to appear, or waiting for fear to disappear before taking meaningful action. But those conditions rarely arrive on their own. The gap between who we currently are and who we sense we could become does not remain silent. It often appears as restlessness, a subtle dissatisfaction that persists even when external circumstances appear stable. Distractions may temporarily quiet this feeling, but they rarely eliminate it. That restlessness is not a flaw. It is often the mind recognizing unused potential. The past does not define identity as permanently as it may appear. Every belief that shapes behavior was formed at some point through experience and repetition. Because beliefs are learned, also be revised. This revision begins with awareness. It begins when a person pauses long enough to question the assumptions guiding their decisions. Instead of automatically accepting long-held beliefs, they ask a simple but powerful question. Is this belief actually true? Or is it simply familiar? From there, change begins through small actions aligned with a different possibility. These actions do not require perfect confidence or immediate certainty. They only require willingness. Each small action provides new evidence. Each repetition creates a new neural pathway. Over time, the brain begins recognizing a new pattern. Gradually, the identity that once felt fixed begins to shift. The most important conversation in this process does not occur with a teacher, mentor, or coach. It happens internally, in the quiet moments where a person decides who they are becoming. Identity is always evolving, whether we guide it intentionally or not. If we do not consciously shape it, the mind will default to the familiar patterns of the past. But when we begin acting in alignment with a new direction, the story gradually changes. What once felt impossible becomes manageable. What once felt unnatural begins to feel ordinary. The narrative of your life was not finalized in childhood. It is still being written with every decision you make. The beliefs you question today, the habits you practice tomorrow, and the actions you repeat over time all contribute to the identity you carry forward. You may not have chosen the beliefs that shaped your early years, but you can choose which beliefs guide the years ahead. And that choice, repeated consistently over time, has the power to transform the direction of an entire life.